Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Herwire. I'm the owner of Herwire Financial Plans with Direction. Today is April 14th. I was thinking of Valentine's Day. And I don't have slides today, so I'm just going to talk extemporaneously about a few things, but first, the roundup of the numbers. First and foremost, the opinions voiced in this material are for general information only and not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All data is believed to be from reliable sources. However, no representation is made as to its completeness or accuracy. None of this is to be construed as tax or legal advice. Consult your advisor prior to taking any action. And lastly, all indices are unmanaged and may not be invested in directly. As of last night, the Dow Jones closed at 34,029.69. Year to date, it is up 2.43%. S&P 500 closed at 3,947.79. Year to date, it is up 17.6%. And I've got the wrong slide here. This much I do know. So let me go back and correct these. My apologies, folks. Okay, so Dow Jones closed at 34,029.69, up 2.43%. S&P 500 closed at 4,146.22, up almost 8%. NASDAQ 100 closed at 13,109.389, up 21.17%. Gold closed at 2,054.7, up 12.7 year to date. Bitcoin closed at 30,474.5, 84 up 84% year to date. US dollar index closed at 101.01, down year to date 2.4%. The 10-year US Treasury closed at 3.45%. It's down 0.43% from its year start at 3.88. And finally, the S&P Aggregate Bond Index closed at 201.74. It is up 3.39%. Thank you for your patience. Okay, today we're going to talk about the importance of diversification. But I'm going to tell you a story from a local company where I had a whole bunch of friends that owned just a boatload of company stock. They worked for the company and they had a whole bunch of stock. And this is a famous company. I'm not going to mention the company's name, but it was on one of the major indexes for over 100 years. And then it's no longer on one of the major indices. So if you're working for a company and your current livelihood is tied to the fortunes of that company, does it make sense to tie your future fortunes, your retirement to that company? Does that make sense? I had a bunch of friends that were millionaires in late 2007, and by the end of 2008, their fortunes, shall we say, were substantially reduced. In some cases, down almost 90%. Again, this is not a hit necessarily on that company. My personal opinion of owning company stock is, except in certain limited situations, I prefer to have upper amount of about 5%. Now, it's especially dangerous if your money is in a company retirement plan, or if it's in what's called a dividend reinvestment plan, where you don't have to pay a brokerage fee to trade the stock. Now, some of the things people don't know about these things is you may not be able to get out as quickly as you want. They may only buy certain days of the month, maybe certain days of the week. But in any event, you're not going to be able to catch a fast moving stock on its way down if you want out. If you have a brokerage account where you do pay some fees, you can set things up so that if the stock drops below a certain amount, it automatically sells. You don't even have to call your broker once the order is in place. So let me give you an apocryphal story about how diversification works and why it's important. There was this lady, we will call her Sue, and she worked hard all her life. And her dream one day was to own a house on the golf course in Hilton Head, South Carolina. She just loved the thought of being able to look out her window and see those beautifully manicured greens, seeing the birds and the wildlife, especially early in the morning. And so she found a house that was an unbelievable deal as far as she was concerned. And the best of all, it had this enormous picture window that just looked out on one of the beautifully manicured greens. Well, one day she's reading her paper and she's drinking her coffee, looking out at God's creation. And all of a sudden, a golf ball goes through that plate glass window and destroys it. Now, I've never put in a plate glass window, but I imagine they're pretty expensive. So she calls her insurance agent and says, hey, here's what happened. He says, no problem, we'll cover it. You got to pay a deductible, but we'll cover it. So she gets the new plate glass window in, and a couple weeks later, she's having her coffee, reading her paper, and looking out on the beautiful vista. And all of a sudden, another golf ball crashes through the window. Now, she's finally figured out why this house was such a deal, because it was on the first tee where the golfers don't always warm up enough, and so they slice their shots. So she called her insurance agent up and said, hey, it broke again. He says, all right, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but we'll cover this one, but you get one more and we're going to drop your insurance. And he says, why don't you just put a piece of plywood? That way we won't have to worry about it anymore. And this was before the days before they had plexiglass. And she says, I bought this house for the view. So she's thinking about it. She's talking to the guy that's coming to replace her plate glass window, and she's complaining about, you know, how her insurance may be dropped if another one of these things happens. And he says, you know something, ma'am, let me offer you an idea, because face it, where you're situated, you're going to have golf balls coming through here from time to time. There's just no getting around that. And so he says, why don't, instead of having one big plate glass window, why don't you have a bunch of smaller panes of glass? They cost, you know, they're cheap to replace. You won't have to call and bother your insurance company and worry about losing your homeowner's insurance. Now, the view won't be quite as good, but it'll still be pretty good. And so she decided to do that. And that's what their diversification, that's an illustration of how diversification works. Now, when you had the big plate glass window, you had all your eggs in one basket, company stock, which no matter what the company is, all it takes is one bad headline. It doesn't even have to be true. All of a sudden, people are selling the stock, and metaphorically, the golf balls are smashing your plate glass window. On the other hand, if you have a whole bunch of smaller windows, or in this case, a whole bunch of individual stocks, or a mutual fund perhaps that has a whole bunch of individual stocks, you can minimize your risk, or at least spread it out, because one bad headline might hit one industry and not the others. So something to consider when you're investing, because if you're investing all in one stock, then you've got to be very careful. And in my mind, that means having your money in a brokerage account where you could set things up to automatically sell if it starts getting too rocky. I know I've done it myself in the past. Steve Herwire, Herwire Financial. If you have questions, feel free to contact me. You can go to my website, herwirefinancial.com. In the upper right-hand corner, there is the schedule an appointment button. And you can set up an appointment either in person, via Zoom, or on the phone. And you can call my phone number 518-631-2569. That's 518-631-2569. Have a terrific weekend.